You're listening to The Manning Report with your host, James David Manning, the news behind the headlines.
A message from the Founding Fathers that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And what I'd like to do is to stand in Independence Hall, or to stand among James Madison and Adams and Jefferson and all of that crowd and Ben Franklin, as they pondered the future of this birth of this new nation that has come out of the loins of Great Britain, United Kingdom. And they've established themselves as a nation. They don't want to be a monarchy, as was their parent nation, with a king and a queen and a parliament. They wanted to be able to establish a nation that produced freedom and the pursuit of happiness and liberty for all men, no matter what their creed or color or belief. And so these scholars, these men of the Founding Fathers gathered in Independence Hall there in Philadelphia, and they debated the way in which this nation should go and how it should be governed. And the final product of all their tedious thinking and prayerful, if you will, and wisdom and also philosophical ideas, out of that was birthed what we now call the Constitution of the United States of America, which became the framework upon which the American at the time, the Union states or the states that had been called together, would then govern themselves at a federalist level, that they would be federalized, and that this one document, the Constitution, would be the law of the land, governing all of the interactions of the citizens of this newfound nation called the United States of America. There weren't that many states at the time when they were being united. And it's an extraordinary document. Some people think that it's one of the greatest documents ever. Of course, when they put together this document, they looked at the documents from the United Kingdom. They looked at the documents from Rome and Italy, and some of the other documents. In fact, much of the Bible had been considered in the documents or the establishment of the nation of Israel and the Pentateuch in the first 5 books of the Bible. So they extracted from all of these various ideas, and they brought together a cadre of various thinkers. Perhaps the most prolific of those thinkers were Ben Franklin and Jefferson and Adams and James Madison, and just a ton of these men whose names will live forever as those who were able to put together the guiding light and the parameters of law that would birth this and form and guide this new nation, the Constitution of the United States of America, and later on its amendments to all of its articles. And so it is. And so what I'd like to do today, Pam, if you would allow me to do, and I pray that you'll give me the liberty to be able to do this, is to bring a message from the Founding Fathers after having studied the Constitution and I've heard about it all the days of my life, and it's been refreshed, and the new articles, new amendments have been brought to it. And so I would like to be able to bring a message from the Founding Fathers, and with respect to where we are on this date and time in history, the 24th of September in the year 2019, and the political circumstances that are happening both in the United Kingdom with Boris Johnson, but more specifically and poignantly to what's happening here in America with America's president, or illegal president, Donald John Trump, who God has named Tribulation Trump. And what I would want to state here is that with all the wisdom of Jefferson and Franklin and others that put together this extraordinary document, of which many people have touted, and you can count me as one of them, except for the Bible, there's never been a document more profound than the U.S. Constitution. The problem is, however, that it did not anticipate, nor could it have, absolutely known that America would select a president like Tribulation Trump. Now, and so as a result of it, the Constitution now finds itself in crisis. And you've heard that word over and over again over the past 2 years, a constitutional crisis. That is to say, when the Constitution reaches and the events going on surrounding the legality or the laws or the well-being of our nation has reached a crisis point. And there's an indecision about which way our nation should go. So there are a couple of things I want to say that the Founding Fathers perhaps did not anticipate, but have sent me here as an addendum, not as an amendment, as an addendum, if you don't mind my speaking on their behalf, that we need to understand that power corrupts, and they understood that. So they established a triune, a trinity based on a trinity of God, whether you believe that or not, God the Father, God the Son, the Holy Spirit. They established a trinity, a triune government with the congressional offices being the Senate and the higher house, and the House of Representatives being the lower house of the congressional office. And then, of course, the executive branch, which would be the branch led by the president or the elected leader, and of all of his administrators that would make up the executive branch. And then, of course, they established the judicial branch, which is the branch that establishes how to mediate the laws of the land. As those laws are created, those laws are written and regulated. If there is a dispute between the executive and legislative branch, that the judicial branch would step in and make a decision based also on firm facts from the Constitution. And so it have, and so we have that to this very day. But what we have now in the constitutional crisis is that we have the executive branch is saying it will not adhere to the Constitution with respect to oversight of its affairs by the congressional branch. That the congressional branch, as far as the executive branch is concerned, is of none effect. That the country is now being run simply and solely by the executive branch, and if there is any interaction by the judicial branch, it will be a small interaction. But we're now operating primarily with a two governmental system rather than a triune or trinity of government systems of which the Constitution was founded. And without that balance, we have a constitutional crisis. But Tribulation Trump has been able to put together a cadre and minion of people based on a fear of the absence of white power, that white people are going into extinction, that they have lost their ability to rule this nation once so beautifully established by the founding fathers of the Constitution, that they must now abdicate the constitutional teachings of their father to maintain their whiteness and to maintain white power or to maintain white supremacy. Whereas if the Constitution and the Congress was able to mediate the executive branch and this fear of the loss of white power, it would be a balanced act, and the courts would then intercede. But at present, we're looking at pretty much a one branch, which would bring us to what a nation would then call a monarchy. And a monarchy, that is to say, a monarch who is a king, the king then presides and makes judicial decision. He makes congressional decision. He is the absolute law. The king is. And that's where we are at present. We're at the present of where the executive branch is now acted as a king, and all the administrators around the executive branch has acted as neutered jesters to the whole idea of the executive branch. And the congressional branch are left, they are lame, they cannot act, they are, in every way they try to secure documents, they are stopped, they are stonewalled, they are blasphemed. And, you know, there is yet a fourth estate to the Constitution, which is was not written into the constitutional idea, and that is the media. They have labeled, or they have been called, the fourth estate. And even that estate has been muted by the monarchy, by the king. The president who was elected president has now established himself as king, has dismantled the Congress, has dismantled the Senate, has neutered the Senate and dismantled the House of Representatives. And now he is the king. And he's also attacked the media as the enemy of the people. And so there is no checks and balances on where we are at present. And so I'm here today with a message from the Founding Fathers and the message is this, is that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Let me say a word to the congressional branch and to those who are not of the fear of the loss of white power, white supremacy, and white power, and with respect to the legislative and financial, if you will, rule over America. The only thing left to do at this point, the only thing that's left in the Constitution that the Congress can play, and this is a congressional, if you will, card. It's a congressional power. Now listen very carefully. The executive branch does not have this power of which I'm about to announce. And no matter how they run their executive to elevate it to a monarchy or their president, Tribulation Trump, to a king, it does not have this power that I'm about to announce. And the judicial branch, the Supreme Court and all the other federal benches and state benches also do not have this power. In the best of wisdom and the dimness of the foresight of the Founding Fathers, they left the congressional branch with this one power. It's called the impeachment power. And they put it in a fancy language that the president can be impeached for things such as high crimes and misdemeanors, which nobody has been able to figure out exactly what that means. But it leaves a broad spectrum of things of which the congressional branch and the congressional branch only can exercise in the event that such an absolute power, an absolute corrupt power arises within what had been founded as the United States of America. The Constitution, the last straw, is called in the impeachment process. That's what that is. Well, you already know that. But let me just say some other things then that it might be reinforced that you know it. That at this present moment, Nancy Pelosi is the Speaker of the House, and she holds the power to call for impeachment hearings to remove Tribulation Trump. There's a lot of banter going back and forth that if she does call for the impeachment, the House will probably do it, but the Senate would never go along with it. I am not absolutely sure that that is correct. I think that the senators that are presently defending Tribulation Trump are defending him because they think in order to be able to live the lavish lives that they live, chauffeur-driven cars, the best of living quarters, the fanciest cigars, the best of meals and restaurants, private travel, the best of medical care, the best of financial security. In order to maintain that, they must support Tribulation Trump, who is supported completely by a group of, and I'll say this with much reserve, the most ignorant, if you will, racist white people that have been birthed on American soil. They are more ignorant than the white or racist white people that brought slaves to America, who I thought were more diplomatic. In fact, history will study and show, a study of history will show that the whites who were slave masters during the time of the slave, and even with a sense of brutality, were more diplomatic and more educated than this group of evangelical Southern Baptist, Salem media, mostly uncollege educated white people that the world has ever seen. And they are in complete support. They have surrendered all of their rights. They have surrendered all of the power of the Constitution. They have surrendered their heritage, and the many men who died at Bunker Hill and the many men who died in Gettysburg, they have surrendered the efficacy of that, and they have given it to a New York, if you will, bankruptcy king, casino owner, public degenerate, pathological liar, psychopath, orange-haired orangutan, coochie-grabbing con man. If the world existed for another 50 years and a review of what these ignorant, uncollege educated white people have done, no one would believe that it is possible. No one would believe it, that a people could regress so far back into a fountain of fear and ignorance that would even make those who brought slaves to America look like good Samaritans. These white men and white women that support Trump, but they have one thing that they've done, and they've stuck together collectively, and as a result of that, the men in the Senate potentially would not vote to convict Trump. But I'm not sure that that's the case. I think that once the matter has rolled on in the impeachment process, full steam, that many of these congresspersons or senators would vote to impeach, and Trump would be out on his rear end. I think there's one other thing that we need to be clear, or two other things, and I promise not to inflict myself upon you any further. There's a lot of fear about the 40 or so congressional seats that were won in the 2018 election that potentially could be lost because it's in purple districts, or they're moderates, or maybe they will go back to supporting Trump. Listen, Nancy, Gerald Nadler, and others that are part of this process. Trump only won the presidency in an electoral college roundup by winning 3 states in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And out of those states, a total of only 71,000 votes. Those votes are gone. He will never, ever, ever get those votes back. And even with the impeachment process, there's only so many other people he can rally. And he cannot rally the same number of votes that he had in the first election, because people hated Hillary. They just didn't come out to vote. But young people will get mobilized, and black people will get mobilized, and Trump will not be able to win a bingo game in the 2020 elections. And that needs to be clear. The same thing about the congressional seats. These people that left Trump in 2018 and voted in the 40 congressional persons that gave Nancy Pelosi the gavel, they're not going back to Trump. They're under impeachment is not going to drive them back to Trump. So I think it's important that you understand that don't fear fear. Don't fear fear, but impeach. Because what's at stake here is the state of our nation. Now, this is a message from the Founding Fathers. It's not necessarily my message. I'm just a messenger. I don't know that this, I will agree with its truth. There is a truth that the impeachment process will only bring more senators and more persons. It will bring an avalanche of people out to vote in the 2020 election that will make Trump look like nobody even knows his name. Like he's having a bad day at the blackjack table if you impeach. That you need to understand. But the Founding Fathers, and that's their message, want you to know that when you give absolute power, it corrupts absolutely. So he has corrupted. And the only way to reverse the absolute corruption that's going on in America at present is that you've got to take the power back. And you've got the power in the Congress. This is a bit of a news blog we do, looking at spiritual wickedness in high places for the most part, making some observations about it and giving people a biblical foundation to the way of interpreting, rather than have Sean Hannity or Laura Ingraham or Janine Pirro or Anderson Cooper or Rachel Maddow or Don Lemon, Rush Limbaugh interpret what's going on in the world. You come to me and I'll tell you based on what the Word of God says. They'll just give you their worldly, sinful view. But the Manning Report will tell you what God has said, whether to say yea or nay, whether to go or to stay. You'll be led by the word of Almighty God. Come to the Manning Report on a daily basis to interpret the spiritual wickedness in high places, because there's plenty of it that's going on. And so I'm the Lord's servant, James David Righteous Rebel Manning, and I'm here to serve you with news and information.